Hello, Tom, David, Vanessa. Good to see you.
How are you?
I know I've been struck, but I do like lightning rounds. I think it's good just to get the juices flowing. Since we're talking about, preparing the next generation, I'm going to start with you, Tom. What do you think we're spending too much time or money on when it comes to this space? And hi, thanks for joining us.
Great, hello. It's really great to be here. I would say, and this will sound counter to like what I spend every single day of my life doing, but I think we've talked too much about financial education and financial wellness. There's just an enormous amount of terrible advice kind of coming through the system now in new channels that there hasn't been before. There's also incredibly strong new ways to reach people, but we've done a lot of talking. And I think it's the opportunity now to actually come behind that and build the infrastructure, particularly for young people, to allow them to automate getting into the game of financial services.
Okay. Do you disagree? No.
I actually agree, and I'll kind of double down and say generic advertising about this is the biggest mistake. What really needs to happen, in my view, for financial education is it needs to be short, relatable, and understandable, and not at this very high macro level that people can't understand and make it real for them.
Okay.
Well, no one has mentioned meme stocks yet. So if you're thinking about, if you ask me, well, what's being overhyped at the moment?
How's it doing?
Meme stocks, definitely. but I would agree that, we have spent a lot of time talking about financial education, but really we need to make sure we start to activate and use technology as an enabler rather than this, adding of bad, for want of a better phrase.
So let me get to that second part then. Let's go from the 30,000 foot down. When you think about some of the more intriguing tools or, maybe tactics out there, you mentioned let's start doing, what's rising on your radar in terms of what's actually making a difference?
Yeah, I think that you're seeing still the very early innings of what I would call is unlocking mechanisms. If you think about reward systems and things built into actual learning that allow you to actually activate an account, a 529, a long-term savings program for a child or families or others. That's something that we feel very strongly about, that there's lots of avenues, but the schools are the most structured, literal physical plant that we have in order to make this happen. So we've focused for 16 years on actually going into schools and going, literally going where all of the wonderful learning and there's infrastructure and support. And so we feel very strongly that that's not the only place, but that's a place. And that the country in particular needs to triple down on that idea of enablement for young people in schools, in classrooms, in buildings.
To use that as a venue.
So I'm going to give you the perspective. TIA is a company that is driven and mission driven to help people prepare for retirement. So I'll give you the employer's perspective. What's working? Things like auto enrollment, things like making it easy for people to save.
Opt out, not opt in.
Opt out, not opt in. Incentivize employers to provide the tax breaks that are available to their employers, teaching them what those things are. These are very easy things. Retirement policy is, I think, one of the 3 issues left in America that's bipartisan. So policy actually helps with this type of thing. So policy direction in the right way to help people save more and making it easier for employers to do this, and then letting assets flow easily from different employers as people move around a lot more. These things really work.
Yeah.
They really
Show
work.
an 18-year-old the beauty of compound investment, and they'll put all their money in that. I do think that's very powerful. How about for you, Vanessa?
Well, so at Edward Jones, we've been around for a long time. We've been around for over 100 years, but we're in almost every community in the United States.
One? Isn't there one community?
But one county, and I need to investigate
Vanessa's
why.
going there afterwards.
They're on the radar.
Yeah. We'll get there.
People.
We'll get there, but we know that we have this massive footprint that we can definitely leverage. And so what we've been trying to do is to make sure that we can get into schools. So of course we have a financial education program. We partnered with Everfi in 2020 to make sure that we can get into especially high need schools. So we're in over 50% of high need schools, over 6,000 high schools, and making a difference. We did say that by the end of 2025, our goal was to reach at least 1 million learners, and we're over 900,000. So we're making progress. Thank you very much. We're making progress in partnership with our, our great company, Everfi, but there's still a lot of work to do, and just making sure that we can have financial information in a smart and digestible way that's really appealing to young people because they want it.
You know, one of the things that's interesting the last few years, you think about what would seem to be innocuous, financial inclusion, economic, justice and addressing, especially for marginalized communities. This has become more difficult. And I'm curious about whether or how the backlash against DEI and the like, how is that impacting, if at all, this space? Is the conversation?
Well, I would say broadly, it's interesting. We do a lot of other things besides financial education. What's interesting about this one is this. First of all, the politics. I'm like a washed up politician. I was a state legislator for a long time. And so I'm like kind of.
Were you a state legislator at 22?
I was, yeah.
Good for you.
Very, lot of wisdom there. A lot of wisdom there at 22. All I had learned. What's fascinating about this one is we focus on, mental health, suicide prevention. We focus on bullying. Like we focus on a lot of areas. Those are incredibly difficult things to inculcate into the culture of a school, the conversations, kitchen table conversations. This, financial literacy is actually like the easiest putt that we take. And it's actually something in a world that's very complicated. This is actually one of the easier ones from an infrastructure perspective. We have these massive institutions have the ability to do it. We've got incredible hearts and minds that want to do it. And this is just a focus on, in the next 10 years, can you do what Jones has done and go and do something on a massive scale for kids in areas that there isn't any money for? And are you willing to step up and do that? That's a big idea, but it's an attainable idea. And so that's what gets me excited, is this is actually something that can happen.
So there's momentum behind it. Have you noticed any difference with regards just to sort of the political environment and such?
Not really. I think to your points, people do align on the need for financial wellness. That's a goal that we have, financial wellness for as many people as we can reach. So I think that's something that is bipartisan and people agree. We haven't really seen any pushback around
I would agree with that. The only thing I would say is that the stats are challenging for minority populations that need to be addressed. If you think about, so our research has suggested that 40% of Americans are not ready for retirement. That number is 50 or higher for minority populations. So the issue is more profound, but I think you're exactly right, which is it's bipartisan and everyone kind of aligns that this
You're
is
more
the right
worried
answer.
about those older generations than some of the
Well, time helps all these types of issues, and an older generation has less time.
And there's a food fight on all of these things. You have to be prepared for the fact that some people don't want the private sector in schools. You have the fact that you've got lots of different constituencies around a school or around young people. You've got different ways, media that are coming at them. So it's a little bit of a complicated surround sound, but again, doable. Yeah.
I want to ask a little bit about the role of the employer. And let's talk maybe whether it's millennials or Gen Z. This is a generation that's perceived to be coming from a deficit coming into the workplace. They feel they can't afford housing. So the idea that their paycheck can then stretch into savings maybe seems less attainable.
Yeah.
What is your message to employers? Are you working with them in terms of, you mentioned opt-in, is there anything else?
Opt-in is a big one. We are absolutely working with our employers. There's a couple things we do. Opt-in, auto-escalation are two things. Number one is providing financial education at the employers that we service. So we will basically create curated programs for kind of high-touch people that really understand it. We'll also do Spanish language classes for people in the cafeteria, for other people who work at higher education institutions. So you have to go where people are. You have to understand those types of things. I would say one other thing I think is important, because there's a lot of skepticism around Gen Z and millennials. I'm less worried about them because of two things. One, they've got time. Time is your best friend for these types of things. And two, I like the fact that they're skeptical and they push back. I like the fact that they went through a very tumultuous period in COVID, understand what risk looks like, understand what it's like to come back from risk. I've got a lot of faith that this learning, this population is going to do well on this issue.
They're not going to be as reckless as us.
I don't know.
I think
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist.
Vanessa, one of the things I want to ask about is this Ed Wow. what do you do differently? You know, what do you think moves the needle? How did you approach this space?
Making things smarter and more digestible for young people. So one of the things that we did, we do a lot of research all the time at Edward Jones, and we partnered with a couple of companies to just really understand, do the next gen or Gen Next, whatever we choose to call that big group between 18 and 34, do they actually think in very short-term lenses? Is that the case? And so we did delve in a lot deeper to understand, well, what's their situation? We found that 1 in 10 of them still has student debt, only a third have health insurance, and half don't have any life insurance, which you wouldn't expect, you know, if you're less than 34 for the most part. So once we understood what maybe some of the issues were, we decided to create this new platform that is really just digital focused. You know, you don't have to come in person to get that education, and do it nice and short. And so we did it in a way that acknowledges that this generation especially has high anxiety. And we decided to just make these, you know, snappy little videos that really speaks to, well,
Like
what does it mean
TikTok
to...
videos?
I
we're not gonna
wouldn't
talk about
use
TikTok.
that as a parallel.
Okay.
I would say, you know...
YouTube videos.
Yes, more YouTube videos,
Okay.
very short, and it speaks to budgeting, savings, compounded interest, all these things that we think are still important. I know value systems are changing, but there's still certain things that are universal and will apply whatever age you are. So we've got really good feedback that this is helping. And the other thing we found is that we can't underestimate the importance of our parents and guardians in terms of immersion. So children learn their first languages at home. Financial education should be treated as a language, and when people are immersed at the home front, you find that they develop better habits when it comes to financial services. So we combine that lens to be able to create this new digital platform that is really snappy and is getting really good feedback. We launched it last August. We've had over 500,000 engagements, and people seem to be happy with what messages they're hearing.
You know what I like, and it pivots to what you actually said earlier. You have to treat people as like the whole person. Mm-hmm. We talk about anxiety. How much do you think about that in terms of the programs you're developing? Because you have this expertise in mental health and other areas. Does that apply to how you approach financial education?
Sure. Yeah, I think Dave made the point earlier about you know, all of this is moving to thinking about the student individually, and less, you know, the concept of the classroom didn't change all that much for a couple of 100 years, you know, 40 seats and a chalkboard, and it's now changing pretty dramatically, and I think that's a positive thing, because what it ultimately does is allows you to, within reason, take a lot of individual factors about that student's life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the biggest thing that we've learned. You walk into any classroom, that is 40 very different humans showing up in very different ways. And any technology ultimately has to be able to track that over time. And that's really where we are in this moment. There's incredible things going on that make me very, very optimistic about that potential.
This is like both, these are national issues, it's hyper-local. I'm gonna ask each of you, what advice do you have in terms of how we can create better infrastructure around this? Of course, you mentioned the schools. You were a former lawmaker. I mean, whether it's on the regulation side or the employer side, give us something you would change. What would you prioritize to really move the needle?
You were higher ranking than I was.
Yeah, okay, you're higher ranking. We'll start with you.
I'm going to go from the employer's lens again. I would make money portable. I would make financial education a part of an employee wellness program, and I would make an employee wellness program mandatory for all employees over 100 people.
Vanessa?
We already have the infrastructure. I think the educational institutions, the employers, and of course lobbying the governments. We've got financial education in at least 33 states. They're not necessarily all mandated, but they're either recommended or required. So I think we're heading in the right direction. We just need more alignments across business in order to drive policy on the government side.
So, do you want to add anything?
I would just say, I think the concept of the public sector doing their part of implementing actually a very good required and multi-step, not a one and done. You know, a lot of times, including us, we tend to, do something senior year during senior week or something, have multi-year from second grade on. And then on the private sector side, I think every financial institution should actually step up to open accounts and create the long-term infrastructure that's portable and can travel with a young person, and start that from kindergarten and rock and roll on that.
That's a
for
good
the life of
tactic. My tactic was not giving them any money after 16. That works. That works
works.
very well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody has any, before we get to final thoughts, any tactic or that stuck with you in terms of that you would adopt? Again, we are in the audience as parents, employers, employees, et cetera. What advice? I think the portability and opening those accounts early is very powerful. Is there anything else you would add?
I would say I want to do two things. Number one, when I say mandatory, I said mandatory by the companies doing it, not the government. Just got to be true to myself here.
Okay.
But what you said is so important. I think parents are underrated. I think parents can make these issues very relatable, very relevant, and very tangible to people. Relatable and tangible is everything for financial education. So I think parents and guardians are undervalued in terms of their necessity to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and David, I'll double down on that. So we found that in this research study that we did recently, we found that 18 to 34-year-olds would rather go to their parents. So almost 70% of them would go to their parents for financial advice. So you would think that in the social media world, everyone is gravitating to social media, especially for financial guidance. But we're finding that maybe they can get their financial information and everything else, but when it comes to guidance, they're going to parents. So for me, what I do, I'm trying to start early with my kids. They're 8 and 10 years old. Not all your pocket money can be used for Lego. It's not going to happen. So how do you take a small portion of that and put it into your bank account and just start those habits really early? So that's something, again, that we've built into our financial education, not just for the young people, but for the parents across the board.
I love that. So I'm going to give you each a chance to give some final thoughts, takeaways. I'm going to start with you.
I think that this is, there's going to be a really, really great next 5 years where a lot of the work that the people in this room, you should see yourself deeply in the middle of this conversation. Like every company that was up here today actually has a really important role in this, and it sounds a little cheesy, but you have the ability to weaponize your employees and get people out in classrooms, and most importantly, figure out a way that your infrastructure can get baked into a long-term infrastructure for kids, and you're going to change. It's tombstone stuff. You will change the trajectory of the country if you do that.
Excellent. David?
I would say two quick things. The first is that I would like people to understand that we do have a preparedness crisis in this country, that people are not saving enough, and people are living longer, and it's getting worse. So encourage people to save as much as they can, as early as they can, and understand that. And two, I run a wealth management business. You're in the wealth management business. People think that financial advice is just for the wealthy. It's not. It needs to be democratized. People need to feel comfortable asking questions about these types of issues. And taking that fear away is massively important.
Yeah. Last word to you, Vanessa.
Yes, I will double down again on the importance we have as employers. We have over 52,000 employees, and the influence we can have over all those people is immense. So I think we need to put our own oxygen mask on first, make sure that all our employees have the necessary financial information, and then you create champions who take it out to the rest of the community. So I'd say double down on putting our own oxygen masks on first, treat our own people right, and then we can make a bigger impact.
I love that.
So.
Tom, David, Vanessa, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our guests.
Thank
We've got
you.
more to come.
Thank you.